Hey y'all, howdy, welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell, and today is going to be my Q3 tier ranking of everything that I read, watched, or consumed. If you are brand new to this video concept, I have everything that I tier ranked from Q1 and Q2 already in here, and so if you're wondering where those rankings come from, I will link the Q1 and Q2 videos down below, so I'm just going to be adding all the Q3 stuff to that. So today I have 28 things to add to the tier ranking list that I read or watched or played in the months of July, August, and September. So let's dive in. So here you can see everything. I'm going to be looking down because my laptop is in my lap. So first up we have the Super Mario Brothers movie, which was extremely mediocre. I was happy with the way that they handled the world and the characters, but so much of it just felt so lazy, especially in the plot and the dialogue and things like that. It just had so much potential, and I felt like it fell really flat in terms of living up to that potential. So yeah, that's gonna go in mediocre. I still had a fun time watching it for the nostalgia, but yeah, it wasn't very good. So I'll put that above When Women Were Dragons. Next up, I have Inside Out 2, the new Pixar movie. I love the first Inside Out movie. I think it's one of the best Pixar films, you know, at least in my top probably 5 or 6. Inside Out 2 was a fun watch, but not anything amazing like the first one was. So I'm just gonna put it probably towards the bottom of a good time. Well, I guess it's kind of in the middle of a good time. I'm gonna put it above Avatar: The Last Airbender show. The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Djeli Clark is a novella that came out this year, and it was an absolute romp. It's a fantasy story about an undead assassin, and it was so fun. I'm gonna put it in great. And I will put it, I'm gonna put it right below Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. Then we have the film Don't Look Up, which is on Netflix and is about a meteorite that comes to destroy the Earth and the scientists who are trying to stop it and all of the political backlash that that entails. It just hit a little too close to home for me. It was supposed to be kind of funny and tongue-in-cheek, but it felt a lot like reality to me, and so I just felt like a deep unease and uncomfortable feeling the entire time I was reading it, or watching it, I mean, so I didn't have that great of a time. And so I'm just gonna put it in mediocre, but I think for the right audience, this would be a really hilarious movie. Then we have Una Out of Order, which was a great book about a woman who has to live her life out of order every year that she wakes up. She's in her body in a different time in her life. And so even though her brain is chronologically aging, her brain like wakes up in different times. And so like her 19-year-old self wakes up in her 53-year-old body and has to kind of piece together what's happened up in her life up to then. And I thought it was really, really well done. I would consider this great. And where do I want to put that? So hard to compare with all these TV shows. It's so weird too, looking back on my tier ranking from Q1 and 2, because already this just looks so inaccurate to me. I don't agree with past Sandra at all. And I'm like, what was I thinking when I put some of these things where they are? So maybe for Q4, when it's like the final end of the year, maybe I'll take some time and rearrange everything the way that current Sandra thinks it should be, because having some distance from these things really definitely changes my perspective on their lasting impact and sway over my current self. But anywho, yeah, Una Out of Order was great. I'm gonna put it, I'll put it between Murderbot and the new Emily Wilde book. Then we have the show The Three Body Problem on Netflix. This is based on a science fiction series that I read last year, and I absolutely love the books, and I actually think they did a really great job with the show, which I was so on the fence about because it is a very deep philosophical type of book and story, and I was curious as to how they were going to translate that for the screen, especially because the characters in the books are not very compelling. They're more just like plot devices, but I think that's one of the things that the show did really well, was making it a more character-focused story, but still having all the major components of the story and moving it forward really, really well. So I really thought they did a great job. And I'm gonna put that above fallout for sure. Empire of Silence, I am a little conflicted on now that I've read the second book, because the second book was kind of a huge flop for me, but I loved the first one and actually gave it 5 stars. But because the second book was such a miss, I'm like a little hesitant about still calling it a 5-star book, which I know is like not fair. But yeah, so where would I put this? I'm gonna put it below Speaking Bones by Ken Liu. That feels good. The History of Bees was it's like a multiple timeline story, each of them connected by bees. And so there's like a past, present, future type of timeline, and the future one is a bit dystopian, which I did find was the most fascinating of the timelines, but overall I just thought the book was really boring. And so that's going to go in mediocre for sure, and I will put that below Red Country. Limbo is actually the only video game that I have on here. I don't play a ton of video games, but I did get totally sucked into Limbo in this Q3, and that was a mobile game that I purchased for my phone. I think it was like $5. And it's like a puzzle game with horror vibes, where you're like a little boy in purgatory and you're trying to like pull the levers and push the buttons and swing on the ropes and things to like solve each level so that you can advance. I love that kind of stuff, and yeah, I thought it was a great game. My only complaint was how the very last level ended, because it indicated that there might have been like a greater story, but there was no story. And so I wish they had leaned a little bit harder into the story, or just left the ending a little less open-ended. But the game itself, the playthrough, was fantastic. I will put that up in great as well. So hard comparing these things that are so different. Matrix Resurrections I watched for the first time this quarter, and it was very mediocre. I liked some of what they were doing with the story, but there were just too many things that were meant for Flash or meant to like be callbacks to the previous movies, which I didn't really appreciate. And again, just parts of it felt very, very lazy, even though I thought the story between like Keanu and Trinity was very strong. But I still had fun watching it. I'll put that maybe at the top of mediocre. Cloud Cuckoo Land I thought was, I've talked about that pretty extensively in recent videos, but it's another like 3 different timelines, past, present, future. There's a lot of tension that pulls you through the story, and it's all connected by one story, one book that's discovered in the past, and how that book affects the lives of the people in the present and the future as well. Yeah, I thought that was great, and I will put it down here by Children of Time. Neon Ghost by Daniel Green is a cyberpunk kind of sci-fantasy by Daniel Green, the YouTuber, if you're familiar with him. I thought it was a very good time, and a bit slow I think in the first half, but the second half really kicks it into high gear. I would be intrigued to pick up the second one if it is coming out anytime soon. If I've completely forgotten all the plot elements of this book by the time the second book comes out, I'll be less inclined to pick it up. I think I will put that below Tremors, but above When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. Howling Dark, this is the book that I still loved so much of it, so to say it was like a total miss is definitely not the right choice of words, but I just had such high expectations after the first book, and then I felt like the pacing in this one was all over the place, and it just got pretty repetitive, and there just seemed to be a lot in there that was unnecessary, especially in the first half of the book. So I'm gonna put this one in, I think I'm gonna put it in the bottom of A Good Time, because I still thought the plot and the characters were fascinating, but I don't know. It's made me question whether I even want to continue with the series. So maybe it only goes in mediocre. Oh, the plot was definitely higher than mediocre, but again, it was a bit bloated. So we'll see. Sing Like Fish is a new fave. This is a nonfiction book about how sound travels underwater, how sound affects underwater species and ecosystems, and the human impact on underwater sounds. Super niche kind of nerd topic here, but I was endlessly fascinated by this book and can't stop thinking about it and talking about it. So it's definitely going up in a new fave. I can definitely see myself recommending this book for years to come, and definitely super relevant with climate change and human impacts on ecosystems and everything that's going on in the world right now. I'm gonna put that below Dune 2. Glorious Exploits is the next book on here. This was a kind of literary fiction about ancient Greece and two men that want to put on a play with some prisoners. Based on the cover with like the googly eyes, I thought it was going to be more comedic than it actually was. It was actually a pretty serious story. Not that it didn't have funny moments, but the overall tone wasn't funny. It was, again, pretty serious, but it was a good time to read. I'm glad that I read it, and I will put it down here at the, maybe above the Underground Railroad. It was definitely more fun to read than the Underground Railroad, which was a really good book, but heavy. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett I thought was mediocre. It was a good story and I had a good time reading it, but it was very forgettable and I don't think has any lasting power for me whatsoever. The themes that were covered in the story I think I've seen done better in lots of other stories. So I will put that probably right below How High We Go in the Dark. Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. Fantastic. I don't love it as much as the first two books in the Stormlight Archive, but it was still an absolute fave for sure, and I think I will put it right below The Grace of Kings. 1Q84 is a DNF and also my least favorite book of the year. I did read 200 pages of this book before I DNF'd it, and it was absolutely awful. I will not ever read anything else by Hukimurakami in my life, and I have a whole vlog where I rant about this for many minutes. If you would like to see my full thoughts on that, I will link it. Next up is a movie called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which just came out this year, I think, but got almost no hype, but it is based on a true story about some men who were kind of enlisted by the British government secretly to try and blow up some British U-boats and allow the Americans to enter the war. And it was only declassified, I think, a few years ago. And so it's kind of a new, interesting look at this like strange aspect of World War II. And it was very kind of tongue-in-cheek the way that the story was told. The characters were very in-your-face, leaping off of the screen type of characters, very charismatic. And it was a fun time. So I'm gonna put this up in great, and I hope that more people will watch it because I think it has a pretty good appeal, I think, universally. I will put this right below The Three-Body Problem. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn is the, I think, only thriller that I've read this year, but it was a fantastic thriller and is definitely setting the standard for unreliable narrator. I think it is absolutely perfectly executed and is definitely great. So I will put this right above Quiet Place Part 2. Burn After Reading was a new movie for me that I had never seen before this year. It's about like the CIA and like a CIA agent that like quits the CIA and wants to write a book, and these people from a local gym somehow like find parts of his book and think that they found some crazy secrets, and they try to blackmail him for it, and it turns into this giant murder fest. It's so weird, it's so off the wall. It was hilarious, and it had a lot of big name actors in it. I can't believe I'd never really heard of or seen this movie before, but it was really great. It made me laugh quite a bit. So I'm gonna put that up there in great as well. I'll put it above Rogue Protocol. The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey is definitely a new fave. This is the best sci-fi book that I have read so far this year. It is by the author of The Expanse, but it is a new series that is not related to The Expanse. It is about an alien invasion and the humans that are captured by these aliens and taken to their alien facilities and forced into slavery. It's so good. I cannot wait to see where the second and third books will go. So that's gonna go, I will put that right below Dune 2. That sounds good. The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka is a classic about a man that turns into a cockroach. Very mediocre. I liked the general concept, but the execution was poor. And let's see, I will put that above Mario Kart. No, I had a better time with Mario Kart. Let's see. Above Great Circle, I think is where it's gonna go. Rhythm of War was my least favorite of the Stormlight Archive books so far. It is the fourth book, but I still loved it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, and I just am so in love with the Stormlight Archive series. I think I will put that between Mirrored Heavens and the Black Cattail Assassins for now. That could change. Blueeye Samurai is an animated show on Netflix. It is about a samurai on a revenge quest in ancient Japan, and it was so good. The only thing I didn't like was kind of how the last episode ended, but it was clearly indicating that there is going to be more show to come. So as long as the second season one does come out and doesn't get canceled by Netflix, I'll be okay with that ending. And so that's gonna go in great for sure, and I will put that above Murderbot. It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over is a novella about an undead woman from her perspective. It was very beautifully written, very literary, kind of an examination of grief and what life means after death. And I thought it was great. Would highly recommend. I will put this right below The Book That Broke the World. Two left, I have The Legend of Vox Makina Season 2, which I think came out earlier this year. This is an animated show based on Dungeons and Dragons, and specifically based on a podcast called Critical Role. And so they've turned the D&D podcast into an animated show. I love season 1. I also thought season 2 was great, and would recommend if you are into D&D and are looking for a good show to watch. I'll put it right above Burn After Reading. And then finally, the last thing on the list today for quarter 3 is A Quiet Place Day 1. And so this is the new one that just came out. It's like a prequel to A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2. And so it's a horror movie about an alien invasion, and sci-fi horror is my favorite type of horror. I thought this was done really, really well, just like the first 2 movies. I think these are really great sci-fi horror if you're into that genre. So again, that's also gonna go, I feel like I just added so much stuff into great. This was a really great quarter, what can I say? I didn't really have a lot of things that went into the other categories, I don't feel like, but good for me, right? Where do I want to put it? I don't know. I feel like I would have to watch all 3 of the Quiet Place movies again, but I do think this was better than The Quiet Place Part 2. So I think in my head right now, I think I would rank Quiet Place, the first one, then Quiet Place Day 1, and then Quiet Place Part 2 would be my order of the 3. So that's it. That's my tier ranking for quarter 3, which is now mixed in with quarters 1 and 2. Like I said, I don't necessarily feel like this whole list is accurate at this point, but maybe we'll get to that in the quarter 4 video. So let me know down in the comments below what your favorite thing was that you watched in quarter 3, read, watched, played, whatever your favorite piece of media was for July, August, and September this year. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for tuning in for a little bit today. As always, please be kind, read more books, and hit the subscribe button down below for more bookish content to come.